There's a strange moment that happens to a lot of people after they retire. Someone asks them a simple question: what do you do? And suddenly you're not really sure how to answer anymore because for 30 or 40 years, your career helped define who you were. You were the electrician or the business owner or the executive. You're the person people relied on. And retirement quietly takes that identity away. That shift turns out to be one of the biggest adjustments people face in retirement, and almost nobody plans for it. So, when most people think about retirement planning, they focused almost entirely on money. How much do I need saved? When should I take Social Security? How should my investments be structured? And don't get me wrong, those are really important questions. But retirement isn't just a financial transition, it's also a life transition because work does a lot more for us than just provide a paycheck. Work gives us structure, it gives us relationships, it gives us a sense that we're needed, and it gives us a role. And then one day that role just disappears. And that's when the real adjustment actually begins. See, researchers have actually studied this transition quite a bit. In psychology and sociology, work is actually considered one of the primary sources of identity in our adult life. And studies on retirement adjustment show that when people leave the workforce, they often experience what researchers call a loss of role identity. So think about that: retiring, there's a loss that happens. In simple terms, that role that helped define who you were is suddenly gone. And what researchers constantly find is that retirement satisfaction often depends on whether people are able to rebuild meaning and identity after leaving work. Some people do this really well, and then others struggle more than they expected to, and it comes as a surprise. In fact, when researchers reviewed multiple retirement studies, they found something interesting. Retirement doesn't automatically make people happier. Don't we all have this dream that when we retire, we'll be happy and ride off into the sunset and do everything we want? Well, they found some people experience higher life satisfaction, but others actually experience lower satisfaction. And there's also a good chunk who experience almost no change at all. And the difference often comes down to something simple: whether someone replaces the role that work used to play in their life. So I see this with clients all the time when they retire. The first few months are actually exciting. They feel amazing. They travel, they relax, they finally have the freedom over their time. But eventually something happens. A question starts creeping into their mind: what do I actually do with my time now? Because for decades, your life had a pattern, it had structure. Monday through Friday, you had responsibilities, you had people depending on you. And then suddenly that structure disappears. And without realizing it, work has been providing something much deeper than just income. It's been providing purpose and identity for people. So, from what I've seen, people who transition into retirement well usually replace three things that work used to provide for them. And this needs to be accounted for. The first thing is structure. Work gave you a schedule. So, without structure, time can feel strangely empty. People who adjust well intentionally create routines again. Now, I'm not talking about rigid 9 to 5 schedules, but just meaningful structure around the things that they want to build into their life. Number two is contribution. One of the biggest psychological shifts in retirement is that feeling of no longer being needed. And that's real. For decades, people relied on you, and now suddenly they don't. And that's why many retirees find meaning in things like volunteering, mentoring, helping family, a lot of grandkids, working part-time, or starting projects, not because they need the money, but because they need the purpose. And then number three is identity. For decades, the answer to what do you do was easy. And now the question becomes deeper. Who are you when you're not defined by your career anymore? That transition doesn't happen automatically. It takes intentional thought. So this is why, in reality, retirement planning has two parts. It has the financial plan and it has the life plan. And I'll interject here that the financial plan needs to be built to support the life plan. But the financial plan answers questions like, how much income do I need? How do I minimize taxes? How do I make sure my money lasts? But the life plan answers something just as important. What does the next chapter of my life actually look like? Because retirement isn't just the end of work, it's the transition into the next phase of identity. And the people who thrive in retirement aren't just retiring from something, they're retiring into something new for their lives. So if you're within a few years of retirement, one of the most valuable things you can do is think about both sides of that transition, not just the financial plan, but the life plan. If you'd like to see the framework that we use to help people start to think through these things and get an initial snapshot of what retirement might look like for them, I'll put a link in the description where you can get your own. I hope this video has been helpful. Have a great day.